The crisp autumn air at Camp Meridian carried the echo of laughter as Elena Vasquez stepped off the military transport bus. At 5 feet 3 inches tall with wire-rimmed glasses perched on her nose, she looked more like a librarian than someone reporting to one of the nation's most elite marksmanship training facilities. Her oversized military-issue jacket hung loosely on her petite frame, and her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun that somehow managed to look both professional and entirely unthreatening. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The source of the laughter became immediately apparent. A group of seasoned marksmen had gathered near the weapons storage facility, their conversation loud enough to carry across the courtyard. Their gazes followed Elena as she struggled with her duffel bag, their expressions ranging from amused skepticism to outright dismissal. Staff Sergeant Morrison, a broad-shouldered man with 20 years of military service etched into the lines around his eyes, glanced at Elena's transfer paperwork with barely concealed irritation. Another desk jockey looking for adventure, he muttered to his colleague, Sergeant Hayes. Probably saw a recruiting poster and thought playing soldier would be fun. Elena said nothing as she adjusted her glasses and waited for further instructions. She had learned long ago that first impressions at military installations were rarely accurate, and corrections often fell on deaf ears. Her transfer documents listed her previous assignment as administrative support at Fort Whitman, a classification that was technically accurate, but woefully incomplete. What the paperwork failed to mention was Elena's unique background. Before her military service, she had been a competitive archer who lost her sight in a training accident at age 16. For 3 years, she had developed extraordinary sensory abilities, learning to navigate the world through sound, touch, and spatial awareness that bordered on supernatural. When experimental surgery partially restored her vision 2 years later, she retained all the heightened senses she had developed during her blindness, creating a combination of abilities that defied conventional understanding. The morning briefing took place in a sterile conference room where Elena found herself seated in the back corner, notebook in hand. Major Richardson, the facility commander, addressed the assembled group with military precision. Camp Meridian represents the pinnacle of precision marksmanship training, he announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to unquestioned respect. We push the boundaries of human capability, achieving shots that most people would consider impossible. Elena took notes diligently, but her enhanced hearing picked up whispered conversations throughout the room. The veterans were discussing previous training cycles, comparing their achievements, and speculating about the new arrivals. Her name wasn't mentioned, but she could sense their dismissive attitude like a physical presence in the room. The facility's crown jewel, Richardson continued, is our advanced sensory training program. We teach marksmen to shoot in conditions where traditional sight becomes unreliable. Low light, smoke, fog, extreme weather. The ultimate test involves blindfolded shooting, where only the most exceptional candidates can achieve consistent accuracy. This caught Elena's attention completely. Richardson was describing capabilities she had already developed through necessity, refined through years of navigating a world without sight. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was sitting in a room full of people learning to do what she had been forced to master as a teenager. After the briefing, Elena was assigned to the Equipment Maintenance Division under the supervision of Technical Sergeant Williams. Williams was a competent administrator who viewed new arrivals as potential problems until proven otherwise. Your job is simple, he explained as they walked through the weapons storage area. Inventory management, cleaning schedules, basic maintenance tasks. Keep track of equipment, stay out of the way of real training, and don't touch anything you're not specifically authorized to handle. Elena nodded politely, filing away the casual dismissal. She had heard similar instructions at every assignment, and she understood the unspoken message. Support personnel were invisible until they made mistakes, and mistakes were career-ending events in military environments. Her assigned workspace was a small office adjacent to the main armory, equipped with a computer terminal and stacks of inventory sheets. While other personnel prepared for advanced training exercises, Elena documented equipment status and maintenance schedules with methodical precision, but her enhanced senses were constantly gathering information that others missed. She could hear the distinctive sounds of different rifle actions from across the facility, the subtle vibrations that indicated when weapons were properly zeroed versus slightly misaligned, the almost imperceptible changes in air pressure that preceded weather shifts affecting long-range accuracy, These weren't skills taught in military manuals, but abilities developed through years of relying on non-visual senses for survival. During her first week, Elena established a routine that kept her productive but unnoticed. She arrived early, completed her assigned tasks efficiently, and observed training exercises from a distance. The marksmen at Camp Meridian were undeniably skilled, achieving accuracy levels that impressed even Elena's trained sensibilities. But she also noticed limitations that others seemed to miss. Their reliance on visual confirmation created vulnerabilities in challenging conditions. When smoke-obscured targets or lighting became problematic, even experienced shooters struggled to maintain consistency. They were training their eyes to be better, but Elena understood that true precision came from integrating all available senses into a unified awareness system. The facility's star performer was Master Sergeant David Chen, a legend in military marksmanship circles whose achievements had earned him international recognition. Chen possessed an almost mystical ability to make impossible shots, earning him the nickname Eagle Eye among his peers. Elena watched him practice during her lunch breaks, noting the fluid precision of his movements and the absolute confidence in his methodology. Chen represented everything Elena wasn't supposed to be. Tall, imposing, with perfect vision and physical capabilities that met every military standard for elite marksmanship. His shooting demonstrations drew crowds of observers, and his techniques were studied by marksmen from around the world. He was visible, celebrated, and officially recognized as exceptional. Elena, by contrast, remained invisible in her administrative role. But invisibility had advantages that she had learned to appreciate. It allowed her to observe without being observed, to study techniques and capabilities without drawing unwanted attention. Most importantly, it gave her access to information that others overlooked, because they assumed support personnel couldn't possibly understand advanced marksmanship concepts. The breakthrough moment came during her second week at Camp Meridian. Elena was inventorying rifle scopes when she noticed something that stopped her cold. One of the precision instruments showed signs of internal misalignment that would be nearly impossible to detect through normal inspection procedures. The deviation was microscopic, but Elena's enhanced tactile sensitivity allowed her to feel vibrations that indicated the scope's reticle was slightly off-center. She documented the issue in her maintenance report, noting the specific technical details that explained why the scope would produce inconsistent results despite appearing perfectly functional. When Sergeant Williams read her analysis, his expression shifted from routine boredom to genuine surprise. "How did you spot this?" he asked, studying the scope through a magnifying device that confirmed Elena's assessment. This kind of internal damage requires specialized equipment to detect. Most technicians would never catch something this subtle. Elena chose her words carefully. "Previous experience with precision instruments," she replied, not mentioning that her blindness had taught her to detect mechanical inconsistencies through touch and sound that sighted people typically missed. "I've worked with similar equipment before." Williams accepted the explanation but made a note in Elena's file about her unusual diagnostic abilities. Word spread through the maintenance division that the new administrative assistant had exceptional technical skills, though no one questioned why someone with such capabilities was assigned to inventory management. The scope incident marked a turning point in Elena's treatment at Camp Meridian. Maintenance personnel began consulting her when they encountered mysterious equipment problems, and her success rate at diagnosing issues became legendary within the support community. She could identify ammunition inconsistencies by weight distribution, detect rifle barrel problems through acoustic resonance, and spot optical alignment issues that stumped certified technicians. But Elena's growing reputation in the maintenance division only highlighted her invisibility within the training community. The marksmen who benefited from her equipment expertise never knew her name or acknowledged her contributions. Their success was attributed to superior training and natural talent, while the technical support that made their achievements possible remained anonymous. This dynamic became particularly evident during Elena's third week, when Master Sergeant Chen experienced a sudden decline in accuracy that threatened his participation in an upcoming international competition. His precision rifle, which had been performing flawlessly for months, began producing inconsistent results that frustrated him and mystified the facility's technicians. Elena observed Chen's practice sessions from her office window, noting the subtle changes in his shooting pattern that suggested equipment issues rather than technique problems. Her enhanced hearing detected minute vibrations in the rifle's action that indicated internal stress, possibly from repeated high-precision use. But as support personnel, she had no authority to offer assistance to elite marksmen, even when she possessed the expertise to solve their problems. The situation reached a crisis point when Chen's rifle malfunctioned during a demonstration for visiting military officials. The failure was public and embarrassing, casting doubt on Camp Meridian's equipment maintenance standards and Chen's continued dominance in competitive shooting. Elena watched the aftermath from her office, feeling the frustration of possessing knowledge that could help but lacking the official standing to offer it. That evening, Elena made a decision that would alter the trajectory of her time at Camp Meridian. She waited until the facility was largely empty, then used her maintenance access to examine Chen's problematic rifle. What she discovered confirmed her suspicions: a hairline stress fracture in the rifle's action that was causing mechanical inconsistencies. The damage was so subtle that it required both exceptional tactile sensitivity and deep understanding of precision mechanisms to detect. The repair was delicate but straightforward for someone with Elena's unique combination of technical knowledge and enhanced senses. She worked through the night, making microscopic adjustments that would restore the rifle's precision without leaving obvious evidence of her intervention. By morning, the weapon was returned to its storage location with no sign that it had been modified. Chen's next practice session vindicated Elena's nocturnal work. His rifle performed flawlessly, restoring the precision that had made him legendary. The improvement was attributed to equipment settling after the previous day's stress, and Chen's confidence returned immediately. Elena watched from her office window, feeling satisfaction that had nothing to do with recognition or credit. But her unauthorized repair work hadn't gone entirely unnoticed. Technical Sergeant Williams had developed an awareness of Elena's exceptional capabilities, and the sudden resolution of Chen's rifle problems struck him as suspiciously convenient. He began paying closer attention to Elena's activities, noting correlations between equipment problems and their mysterious resolutions whenever Elena had access to the affected weapons. The situation came to a head during Elena's 4th week at Camp Meridian. A critical training exercise was scheduled for visiting military dignitaries, designed to showcase the facility's advanced capabilities and secure continued funding for the program. The exercise would culminate in a demonstration of blindfolded shooting, where marksmen would attempt to hit targets using only auditory cues and spatial awareness. Elena learned about the demonstration through maintenance bulletins that described the specialized equipment required for the exercise. Sound dampeners, target indicators, and safety protocols all pointed to an event that would test capabilities she had been developing since her teenage years. The irony of watching others attempt what she had mastered through necessity was both amusing and frustrating. The demonstration was scheduled for Friday morning, giving the facility's best marksmen several days to prepare for the challenging conditions. Elena observed their practice sessions with growing amazement at how much they struggled with basic sensory awareness tasks. These were exceptional shooters when relying on vision, but removing that sense revealed fundamental gaps in their training. She watched Chen practice blindfolded shooting with particular interest. His visual dominance was so complete that losing sight left him disoriented and uncertain. He could hit targets consistently with his eyes open, but blindfolded attempts were erratic and inconsistent. The other marksmen fared no better, struggling to develop sensory awareness in days that had taken Elena years to perfect. Wednesday morning brought news that would change everything at Camp Meridian. Elena was organizing inventory sheets when Technical Sergeant Williams burst into her office with an expression of barely controlled panic. The visiting dignitaries had moved their schedule forward, he announced breathlessly. The blindfolded shooting demonstration is happening this afternoon instead of Friday. We have 4 hours to prepare, and our best marksmen are nowhere near ready for this level of performance. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Elena looked up from her paperwork, noting the stress in William's voice and the implications of what he was saying. The facility's reputation depended on demonstrating capabilities that their personnel hadn't yet mastered. A situation that could result in public embarrassment and funding cuts that would affect everyone's career. Chen is struggling with basic spatial awareness, Williams continued, pacing frantically around Elena's small office. Morrison can't hit anything without visual confirmation, and Hayes gets disoriented the moment we put a blindfold on him. These are our best people, And they're going to humiliate us in front of Pentagon officials and international observers. Elena remained silent, understanding that Williams was venting frustration rather than seeking advice from support personnel. But her mind was already analyzing the problem from angles that others couldn't consider. The marksmen were failing because they were trying to shoot blind rather than learning to shoot with enhanced non-visual awareness. They were treating the absence of sight as a handicap rather than an opportunity to utilize other senses more effectively. What we need is someone who understands blindfolded shooting fundamentally, Williams muttered, still pacing. Someone who's developed those capabilities over years rather than days. But that kind of expertise doesn't exist in our current personnel roster. Elena made a decision that would either save the demonstration or end her military career. "Sergeant Williams," she said quietly, "I might be able to help with the blindfolded shooting demonstration." Williams stopped pacing and stared at her with an expression that suggested he thought stress had affected her judgment. "Elena, your administrative support. This is about advanced marksmanship capabilities that require years of specialized training." "I understand the requirements," Elena replied calmly, "but I also have relevant experience that might be applicable to this situation." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Before my military service, I developed extensive experience with non-visual navigation and spatial awareness. I might be able to provide insights that could help the marksmen improve their performance." Williams studied her face for signs of delusion or misplaced confidence. Elena Vasquez was competent at equipment maintenance and inventory management, but suggesting she could contribute to elite marksmanship training seemed absurd. Yet her track record of solving technical problems that stumped certified experts suggested capabilities that extended beyond her official job description. "What kind of experience are you talking about?" Williams asked skeptically. Elena took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would either create opportunities or generate ridicule. "From age 16 to 19, I was completely blind due to a training accident. During that time, I developed sensory awareness and spatial navigation abilities that most people never experience. When my sight was partially restored, I retained those enhanced capabilities. The revelation hung in the air between them like an unexploded bomb." Williams had worked with Elena for a month without knowing about her blindness or the unique abilities it had forced her to develop. Her exceptional diagnostic skills suddenly made perfect sense, as did her ability to detect equipment problems that others missed. "You were blind for 3 years?" Williams asked, his voice carrying new respect mixed with amazement. Elena nodded, understanding that she was revealing information that would fundamentally change how others perceived her capabilities. "I learned to navigate complex environments using sound, touch, and spatial awareness," she explained. "I developed techniques for determining distances, identifying objects, and moving through spaces that most sighted people would find impossible to manage without vision. When blindfolded shooting removes the visual component, I'm operating in conditions I spent years mastering." Williams sat down heavily in the chair across from Elena's desk, processing implications that extended far beyond the immediate crisis. If Elena possessed the sensory awareness capabilities she claimed, she might be the solution to their demonstration problem. But involving support personnel in elite marksmanship training violated numerous protocols and could result in career-ending consequences if the arrangement failed. "Can you actually shoot?" Williams asked bluntly. "Having enhanced senses is one thing, but marksmanship requires precision that goes beyond spatial awareness." Elena smiled for the first time since arriving at Camp Meridian. "During my recovery period, I trained extensively with adaptive shooting techniques. I've maintained those skills through regular practice, though I've never had the opportunity to demonstrate them in a military context." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Major Richardson, who entered Elena's office without knocking. His expression suggested that the crisis was escalating beyond what anyone had anticipated. "Williams," he said grimly, "I just received word that the visiting delegation includes representatives from 3 foreign militaries who specifically requested to observe our blindfolded shooting capabilities. This isn't just about funding anymore, it's about international credibility." Richardson noticed Elena sitting behind her desk and seemed surprised to find a conference taking place in the administrative office. "What's the situation with our demonstration preparations?" he asked Williams while glancing curiously at Elena. Williams made a decision that would define the rest of his career. "Sir, Elena has relevant experience with blindfolded spatial awareness that might help our marksmen improve their performance before this afternoon's demonstration. She's offered to provide technical consulting on sensory awareness techniques. Richardson studied Elena with new attention, noting details he had overlooked during their previous interactions. Technical consulting from administrative personnel was unusual, but desperate situations required unconventional solutions. What kind of experience are we talking about, Vasquez? Elena repeated her explanation about her blindness and the enhanced sensory capabilities she had developed during that period. Richardson listened with growing interest, recognizing that Elena's background might represent exactly the expertise they needed to salvage the demonstration. How confident are you about applying these techniques to marksmanship training? Richardson asked directly. Elena considered the question carefully, understanding that her answer would determine whether she received an opportunity to help or continued filing inventory reports indefinitely. I'm confident that I can improve the marksman's performance significantly within the available time frame, she replied. The techniques they're currently using treat blindness as a limitation rather than an opportunity to utilize enhanced sensory awareness. With proper instruction, they can develop capabilities that exceed their current performance levels. Richardson exchanged glances with Williams, both men recognizing that Elena's offer might be their only hope of avoiding professional disaster. The visiting delegation expected to witness advanced military capabilities, and failure to deliver would have consequences that extended far beyond Camp Meridian. All right, Vasquez, Richardson decided. You have 3 hours to work with our marksmen and prepare them for the demonstration. If this arrangement succeeds, you'll receive official recognition for your contribution. If it fails, the responsibility will be entirely yours. Elena stood up from her desk, feeling a mixture of excitement and terror at the opportunity she had been granted. 3 hours to teach elite marksman capabilities that had taken her years to develop seemed impossible, but she understood that conventional training methods weren't applicable to this situation. I'll need direct access to the practice range and complete authority over training methods during the preparation period, she said, surprised by the confidence in her own voice. The marksmen will need to trust techniques that probably seem counterintuitive compared to their previous experience. Richardson nodded his agreement, authorizing Elena to take charge of preparation for the most important demonstration in Camp Meridian's recent history. As she gathered her notes and prepared to leave the administrative office, Elena realized that she was about to step out of invisibility into a spotlight that would either validate her unique capabilities or expose her to ridicule from some of the military's most skilled marksmen. The practice range felt different when Elena approached it with authority rather than as an observer. Master Sergeant Chen, Sergeant Morrison, and Sergeant Hayes were already assembled, having been summoned for emergency training without explanation of what that training would involve. Their expressions ranged from curious to skeptical, as Elena introduced herself as their temporary instructor. Gentlemen, she began, standing before men who had decades more military experience and official qualifications that dwarfed her administrative credentials. I know the situation is unusual, but we have a unique opportunity to approach blindfolded shooting from a completely different perspective. Chen, who had been struggling with blindfolded accuracy all week, looked particularly doubtful. No offense, Vasquez, but what can an equipment clerk teach us about marksmanship that we haven't already learned through years of professional training? Elena had anticipated this reaction and was prepared for it. I'm not here to teach you how to shoot, she replied calmly. You already possess those skills at an exceptional level. I'm here to teach you how to see without your eyes, which is a completely different capability that most people never develop. She gestured toward the targets that had been set up for blindfolded practice, noting the frustrated expressions of men who are accustomed to consistent success. When you lose visual input, you're trying to compensate by using other senses as substitutes for sight. But that approach treats blindness as a limitation, rather than recognizing it as an opportunity to access capabilities you already possess but haven't learned to utilize. Morrison crossed his arms skeptically. What capabilities are you talking about? We can hear target indicators and feel weapon alignment, but that's not enough for precision shooting at any significant range. Elena smiled, recognizing the exact mindset that had limited their progress. You're thinking about individual senses as separate tools, she explained. But spatial awareness comes from integrating all available sensory input into a unified understanding of your environment. When that integration occurs, you can perceive distances, directions, and relationships with accuracy that exceeds what most people achieve through vision alone. Hayes looked intrigued despite his initial skepticism. How do you develop that kind of integrated awareness? It sounds theoretical rather than practical for marksmanship applications. Through exercises that force you to trust non-visual information, Elena replied. We're going to start with basic spatial navigation, then progress to target identification, and finally to precision shooting. By the time we're finished, you'll understand that blindfolded shooting isn't about overcoming a handicap. It's about accessing capabilities that exist beyond normal sensory limitations. She led them through a series of exercises that began with simple navigation while blindfolded. Elena had each marksman walk predetermined distances, change directions based on audio cues, and identify objects through touch and sound. Initially, their movements were hesitant and uncertain, but gradually they began to trust information from sources other than their eyes. The breakthrough came when Chen successfully navigated a complex obstacle course while blindfolded, moving with confidence that surprised everyone, including himself. Elena watched his progress with satisfaction, recognizing the moment when theoretical understanding became practical capability. Now you're beginning to understand, she told him as he removed his blindfold. Your spatial awareness didn't suddenly improve. You simply learned to access information that was always available but previously ignored because you relied primarily on visual input. Elena proceeded to demonstrate techniques that seemed impossible to the watching marksman. She moved through the range while blindfolded, identifying targets by their acoustic signatures, determining distances through sound reflection, and navigating obstacles with fluid precision that suggested supernatural awareness. How are you doing that? Morrison asked with amazement. Elena's movements while blindfolded were more confident than most people achieved with full sight. Years of practice. Elena replied simply. When you can't rely on vision, you develop alternative awareness techniques that can be more precise than sight under certain conditions. The key is learning to trust information that seems foreign until you develop proficiency with it. She spent the next hour teaching them to identify target positions through audio cues, explaining how sound reflection patterns revealed distances and directions with remarkable accuracy. The marksmen were skeptical initially, but Elena's demonstrations convinced them that their preconceptions about sensory limitations were fundamentally incorrect. By the second hour, Elena had them attempting blindfolded shots at close range using techniques that integrated auditory targeting with traditional marksmanship skills. Their initial attempts were erratic, but improvement came rapidly as they learned to trust sensory input they had previously ignored. Chen achieved the first successful blindfolded hit, striking a target at 25 meters using only audio cues for guidance. His excitement was immediate and infectious, spreading to Morrison and Hayes as they realized that Elena's methods were producing results that exceeded their expectations. The final hour focused on extending range and improving consistency. Elena taught them to read wind patterns through sound, to detect target vibrations that revealed precise positioning, and to integrate breathing and trigger control with enhanced spatial awareness. By the end of their training session, all three marksmen were achieving blindfolded accuracy that they had considered impossible just hours earlier. As the visiting delegation assembled for the demonstration, Elena felt a mixture of pride and anxiety. She had successfully taught experienced marksmen to access capabilities they never knew they possessed, but the upcoming performance would determine whether their newfound skills could withstand the pressure of international observation. The demonstration area filled with military officials, foreign observers, and defense contractors whose reactions would influence Camp Meridian's future funding and reputation. Elena stood at the side of the range, officially present as technical support but privately responsible for the success or failure of everything about to unfold. Major Richardson addressed the assembled observers with confidence that Elena hoped was justified. Today's demonstration will showcase advanced sensory marksmanship capabilities that represent the cutting edge of military training, he announced. Our marksmen will engage multiple targets while blindfolded, using enhanced spatial awareness techniques that exceed conventional limitations. Elena watched the faces of foreign military representatives, noting expressions that ranged from skeptical curiosity to anticipatory satisfaction. Some of them clearly expected to witness American military training failures that would validate their own program's superiority. The first phase of the demonstration involved Chen engaging 5 targets at varying distances while blindfolded. Elena had positioned herself where she could provide audio cues without being obvious about it, creating acoustic references that would help him maintain spatial orientation during the performance. Chen moved to the firing line with confidence that impressed the observers, his movements fluid and assured, despite the blindfold that covered his eyes. Elena watched his breathing pattern and body language, recognizing signs that he was successfully integrating the sensory awareness techniques she had taught him. The first shot struck dead center on a target positioned 40 meters away. The second hit was equally precise, followed by 3 more that demonstrated consistency rather than luck. Chen's performance exceeded even Elena's expectations, validating training methods that had seemed theoretical just hours earlier. Morrison's performance was equally impressive, engaging targets that required lateral movement and complex spatial calculations. Hayes concluded the formal demonstration with a sequence that involved shooting while moving between positions, integrating navigation and marksmanship in ways that amazed the watching officials. But Elena knew that the real test was still to come. Major Richardson had planned a special conclusion to the demonstration, something that would either establish Camp Meridian's reputation definitively or create a disaster that would overshadow their previous successes. For our final demonstration, Richardson announced to the assembled observers, "We'll be attempting something that pushes the boundaries of human capability. 15 targets at various ranges and positions, engaged by a single marksman while blindfolded, representing the ultimate integration of sensory awareness and precision shooting." Elena felt her heart stop as she realized what Richardson was proposing. 15 blindfolded shots was beyond what any of the marksmen had attempted during their training, a level of performance that would require capabilities she wasn't certain anyone could achieve under demonstration pressure. "Master Sergeant Chen will be making this attempt," Richardson continued, gesturing toward the marksman who had performed flawlessly during the earlier phases. Elena could see Chen's confidence wavering as he contemplated the challenge that awaited him, understanding that 15 consecutive hits would require sustained concentration and precision that exceeded anything he had previously achieved. The targets were positioned at distances ranging from 25 to 100 meters, creating a complex engagement sequence that would test every aspect of the sensory awareness techniques Elena had taught. Some targets were stationary while others moved slightly, adding variables that would challenge even experienced blindfolded shooting. Elena watched Chen prepare for the attempt, noting subtle signs of stress that suggested his confidence was beginning to crack under the enormous pressure. The foreign observers were clearly anticipating failure, their expressions suggesting that they viewed the 15-target challenge as American overconfidence that would result in public embarrassment. As Chen moved to the firing line, Elena realized that the success or failure of this demonstration would determine not only Camp Meridian's reputation, but also the future recognition of sensory awareness training techniques that could revolutionize military marksmanship programs. The first shot missed completely, striking ground well left of the intended target. Elena felt sick as she watched Chen's body language change, his movements becoming hesitant and uncertain, as doubt began to undermine the confidence she had spent hours building. The second shot was closer, but still missed, confirming that Chen was struggling under pressure that exceeded his current capabilities. Elena could see foreign observers exchanging satisfied glances, recognizing that they were witnessing exactly the kind of American military failure they had hoped to document. After the third miss, Major Richardson was beginning to look desperate, understanding that continued failure would create an international incident that would follow him for the rest of his career. Elena watched the demonstration collapsing in real time, feeling responsible for encouraging expectations that couldn't be met under these conditions. Then Chen removed his blindfold and stepped away from the firing line, his expression showing defeat and frustration that was painful for Elena to witness. The demonstration was effectively over, having achieved the opposite of its intended effect by showcasing American military inadequacy rather than superiority. Major Richardson was preparing to make excuses to the assembled observers when Elena made a decision that would either save the demonstration or end her military career permanently. She stepped forward and addressed the major in a voice that carried across the suddenly quiet range. "Sir," she said clearly, "I volunteer to complete the 15-target engagement." The silence that followed her announcement was deafening. Foreign observers looked confused about why administrative personnel was volunteering for advanced marksmanship demonstration. American officials appeared mortified that support staff was attempting to salvage a situation that elite marksmen had failed to handle. Richardson stared at Elena with an expression that suggested he thought stress had caused a complete mental breakdown. "Vasquez, this is not appropriate. You're not qualified for this type of demonstration, and failure would make our situation exponentially worse." But Elena was already moving toward the firing line, her movements carrying a confidence that surprised everyone, including herself. "Sir, with respect, I have the sensory awareness capabilities necessary to complete this engagement successfully. I request permission to demonstrate techniques that might restore confidence in American military training methods." The request was so audacious that Richardson found himself momentarily speechless. Elena Vasquez was suggesting that she could achieve what Master Sergeant Chen had failed to accomplish, despite having no official marksmanship qualifications or recognition as an elite performer. Elena understood that her next words would determine whether she received an opportunity to vindicate her claims or continued filing inventory reports while living with the knowledge that she could have prevented a military embarrassment. "I've been developing these capabilities for over a decade," she said quietly. "This is exactly the kind of challenge I'm prepared to meet." Richardson looked toward the assembled observers, recognizing that conventional solutions had failed, and unconventional ones might be their only remaining option. The foreign representatives were clearly expecting him to reject Elena's offer, anticipating that American desperation would lead to even more spectacular failure. One attempt, Richardson decided grimly. If you miss the first target, the demonstration ends immediately. Elena nodded her understanding, knowing that 15 consecutive hits while blindfolded would either establish her reputation permanently or destroy any credibility she might have developed during her time at Camp Meridian. As she approached the firing line, Elena could hear whispered conversations among the observers, their tones ranging from curious anticipation to barely concealed amusement. The idea that a small, unassuming administrative clerk could achieve what elite marksmen had failed to accomplish seemed absurd to everyone present. But Elena was entering a mental state that she had developed during her years of blindness, a level of sensory integration that allowed her to perceive spatial relationships with supernatural accuracy. The range became a three-dimensional map in her consciousness, with each target position clearly defined through acoustic signatures and environmental cues that others couldn't detect. She accepted the blindfold that Richardson offered, understanding that the next few minutes would determine the trajectory of the rest of her life. 15 targets awaited engagement, positioned at distances and angles that would challenge every technique she had learned during her years of adapting to life without sight. As the blindfold settled into place, Elena felt the familiar sensation of enhanced awareness taking control. The world didn't disappear when her vision was blocked. Instead, it transformed into a complex pattern of sounds, vibrations, and spatial relationships that provided information more precise than most people achieved through sight alone. The first target was positioned at 30 meters, its location clearly defined by acoustic reflections from the metal surface. Elena raised her rifle with movements that appeared supernaturally confident to the watching observers, her positioning suggesting that she could see the target despite the blindfold covering her eyes. Her breathing settled into the controlled rhythm that marksmanship required, but her spatial awareness was operating on levels that transcended conventional shooting techniques. She could feel the target's presence like a physical force, its position and distance as clear as if she were looking directly at it. The first shot struck dead center, producing shocked silence from observers who had expected immediate failure. Elena's confidence was absolute, her movements flowing with precision that suggested years of practice under these exact conditions. The second target required lateral adjustment and range estimation that challenged conventional blindfolded shooting capabilities. But Elena's enhanced spatial awareness made the calculations automatic, integrating distance, direction, and environmental factors into instinctive adjustments that produced another perfect hit. By the fifth successful engagement, the foreign observers had stopped taking notes and started paying attention with genuine amazement. Elena's performance was exceeding their expectations and challenging their assumptions about human sensory limitations under stress conditions. Elena continued through the sequence with mechanical precision, each shot demonstrating capabilities that seemed impossible to witnesses accustomed to conventional marksmanship training. Her movements were fluid and confident, never hesitating or showing uncertainty about target locations that others couldn't even approximate while blindfolded. The 10th hit prompted whispered conversations among American officials who were beginning to realize that they were witnessing something unprecedented in military marksmanship demonstration history. Elena Vasquez was not only saving their reputation, but establishing new standards for what human capability could achieve under controlled conditions. Target 11 was positioned at the maximum engagement range, requiring range estimation and wind compensation that challenged even experienced marksmen using optical sights. But Elena's enhanced sensory awareness allowed her to read environmental conditions through acoustic patterns and air movement that provided precision data for her calculations. The hit was perfect, striking dead center, despite the extended range and challenging conditions. Elena's demonstration was becoming legendary even as it unfolded, establishing her as someone whose capabilities transcended conventional understanding of human sensory limitations. Targets 12, 13, and 14 fell in rapid succession, each engagement demonstrating consistent accuracy that eliminated any possibility of luck or coincidence. Elena was performing at levels that redefined what blindfolded shooting could achieve, validating training methods that seemed supernatural to conventional military thinking. The 15th and final target was positioned at an angle that required complex calculations and perfect execution to achieve a successful hit. Elena paused for a moment, integrating all available sensory information into her spatial awareness before making final adjustments for the engagement. The shot was perfect, striking the center of the target with precision that ended the demonstration on a note of absolute triumph. Elena lowered her rifle and removed her blindfold, revealing a calm expression that suggested she had never doubted the outcome of her performance. The silence that followed was profound and absolute. Foreign observers who had arrived expecting to document American military inadequacy found themselves witnessing capabilities that exceeded their own national programs. American officials who had feared international embarrassment were suddenly dealing with success that surpassed their most optimistic expectations. Elena Vasquez had achieved 15 consecutive hits while blindfolded, demonstrating sensory awareness and marksmanship integration that would be studied and discussed in military circles for years to come. She had saved Camp Meridian's reputation while establishing herself as someone whose unique capabilities demanded recognition and respect. But as applause finally broke the stunned silence, Elena remained focused on the techniques that had made her achievement possible rather than the personal recognition it would bring. She had proven that human capability could exceed conventional limitations when properly developed and applied, validating years of adaptation and training that had been invisible to everyone until this critical moment. The blindfolded 15-target engagement would become legendary in military marksmanship history. The transformation at Camp Meridian began within hours of Elena's demonstration, though not in ways she had anticipated. Her unprecedented achievement had created a media firestorm that extended far beyond military circles, drawing attention from news organizations, scientific institutions, and government agencies that viewed her capabilities as matters of national security importance. Elena found herself sequestered in Major Richardson's office, while officials determined how to handle the publicity surrounding her performance. Through the window, she could see news vans gathering outside the facility's main gate, their satellite dishes and camera crews creating a circus atmosphere that contrasted sharply with Camp Meridian's usual operational discretion. The international observers who had witnessed her blindfolded shooting were being debriefed by intelligence personnel, their accounts of Elena's capabilities requiring verification and analysis before being released to their respective governments. What had begun as a routine training demonstration had evolved into a diplomatic incident with implications that extended throughout the military establishment. Dr. Sarah Mitchell from the Army Research Laboratory arrived that afternoon with a team of specialists whose mission was to understand the scientific basis for Elena's extraordinary sensory awareness. Mitchell was a neurologist who had spent decades studying human perceptual capabilities, and Elena's performance had challenged everything she thought she knew about sensory integration and spatial processing. Ms. Vasquez, Dr. Mitchell began as they settled into a conference room away from the media attention. Your demonstration this morning suggests capabilities that exceed current scientific understanding of human sensory limitations. We need to understand how you develop these abilities and whether they can be replicated in other personnel. Elena had anticipated this line of inquiry and was prepared for it. During my period of blindness, she explained, I was forced to develop alternative sensory processing techniques that most people never need to access. When my sight was restored, I retained those enhanced capabilities while regaining visual input, creating a sensory integration system that operates beyond normal human parameters. Dr. Mitchell took detailed notes while Elena described her adaptation process, focusing particularly on the neurological changes that had occurred during her years without sight. The human brain demonstrates remarkable plasticity when forced to compensate for sensory loss, she observed. But retaining those adaptations after sensory restoration is extremely rare and poorly understood. Elena agreed to participate in a comprehensive scientific evaluation that would map her neurological functions and identify the physiological basis for her enhanced capabilities. The research would take weeks to complete and might provide insights that could revolutionize understanding of human sensory potential. But Elena was more interested in the practical applications of her abilities than their scientific explanation. While researchers planned their studies, Elena's military status was undergoing rapid revision. Her personnel file was being updated to reflect capabilities that had been hidden behind administrative classifications. And her role at Camp Meridian was expanding to include responsibilities that matched her demonstrated expertise. Technical Sergeant Williams approached her with a mixture of amazement and professional respect that represented a complete reversal from their initial interactions. "Elena," he said, shaking his head in continued disbelief, "I've been in military training for 15 years, and I've never seen anything comparable to what you accomplished today. How did you keep those capabilities hidden for so long?" Elena considered the question carefully, understanding that her answer would influence how others perceived her motivations and character. "I wasn't hiding anything deliberately," she replied. "Military classifications don't include categories for the kind of sensory awareness I developed, so my abilities were never officially recognized or documented. I was simply placed in positions that seemed appropriate based on conventional qualifications." The irony of her situation was becoming increasingly apparent to everyone involved. Elena possessed capabilities that could revolutionize military training, but bureaucratic systems had classified her as support personnel because her background didn't match established categories for elite performance. Her achievement had exposed fundamental flaws in how the military identified and utilized exceptional talent. Master Sergeant Chen sought her out that evening, his expression carrying humility that contrasted sharply with his usual confidence. "Elena," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology for my initial skepticism. Your performance today was beyond anything I thought was humanly possible, and your training methods produced results I couldn't achieve through conventional techniques." Elena appreciated his honesty and the courage it had taken to acknowledge his misconceptions. "Everyone learns differently," she replied diplomatically. "What matters is recognizing when alternative approaches might be more effective than traditional methods." Chen's experience represented a broader transformation occurring throughout Camp Meridian's training community. Instructors who had dismissed Elena's unconventional techniques were now requesting detailed briefings on sensory awareness training methods. Her success had validated approaches that challenged fundamental assumptions about how marksmanship skills should be developed and applied. The media attention surrounding Elena's achievement was creating complications that extended beyond Camp Meridian's ability to manage. News organizations were demanding interviews and access to information about training methods that remained classified. Foreign governments were expressing interest in Elena's techniques, creating diplomatic pressures that required careful navigation to protect American military advantages. Elena received a summons to Washington within a week of her demonstration, where Pentagon officials wanted to discuss the strategic implications of her capabilities. The meeting took place in a secure conference room where Elena found herself facing military leadership, whose decisions would determine how her abilities were utilized for national security purposes. General Patricia Hawkins, the Army's senior training commander, addressed Elena with respect that reflected her newfound status within military hierarchy. "Miss Vasquez, your performance at Camp Meridian has created opportunities and challenges that require careful consideration. Your capabilities represent potential advantages for American military effectiveness, but they also raise questions about how we identify and develop similar talents in other personnel." Elena understood that she was being evaluated not only for her individual abilities, but also for her potential as a trainer and developer of enhanced sensory awareness programs. The military was interested in replicating her success on a larger scale, creating capabilities that could provide strategic advantages in conflicts where conventional superiority might not be sufficient. The briefing sessions in Washington lasted 3 days and covered topics ranging from neurological research to international security implications. Elena was introduced to specialists from various agencies who were interested in different aspects of her abilities, from intelligence-gathering applications to special operations training enhancements. Dr. James Harrison from the Defense Intelligence Agency was particularly intrigued by the potential applications of Elena's sensory awareness techniques for covert operations. Personnel who could navigate and operate effectively under conditions where vision was compromised or unavailable would possess significant advantages for sensitive missions, he explained. Elena listened to these discussions with growing ambivalence about the directions her life was taking. Her achievement at Camp Meridian had been motivated by a desire to help her colleagues succeed rather than to advance her own career or contribute to military strategic planning. The prospect of becoming a valuable asset in government programs felt foreign to someone who had spent years adapting to invisibility. Colonel David Park from Special Operations Command presented Elena with an offer that would change her life fundamentally. "We want to establish a new training program based on your sensory awareness techniques," he explained. "You would lead development of curricula that could produce personnel with enhanced capabilities for specialized missions. The position would involve working with our most elite units and developing techniques that could provide decisive advantages in critical situations." The offer was attractive from professional and financial perspectives, but Elena requested time to consider the implications before making a commitment. She understood that accepting the position would transform her from a soldier who had adapted to personal challenges into a key figure in military capability development, a role that carried responsibilities she wasn't certain she wanted to assume. Her return to Camp Meridian provided an opportunity to observe how her achievement had affected the facility's training programs and personnel attitudes. The blindfolded shooting demonstration had become legendary within military circles, inspiring changes that extended throughout the marksmanship training community. Elena found that her former administrative office had been converted into a specialized training center, where personnel from various installations came to study sensory awareness techniques. Her informal role as equipment maintenance supervisor had evolved into official recognition as the military's premier expert on enhanced sensory integration for marksmanship applications. But the transformation also created complications that Elena hadn't anticipated. Media attention had made her a public figure whose privacy was compromised by constant requests for interviews and appearances. Military officials were pressuring her to participate in publicity campaigns that would promote recruitment and funding initiatives. Her achievement was being used for purposes that had nothing to do with the personal growth and adaptation that had motivated her original development of these capabilities. Elena's most meaningful interactions continued to be with individual trainees who struggled with conventional marksmanship methods and benefited from alternative approaches to skill development. She worked with personnel who had visual impairments, learning disabilities, or anxiety disorders that interfered with traditional training effectiveness. Private Jennifer Walsh had been referred to Elena after repeated failures in standard marksmanship qualification courses. Walsh suffered from a visual processing disorder that made it difficult for her to acquire targets through conventional sighting methods, creating persistent accuracy problems that threatened her military career. Elena's sensory awareness training provided Walsh with alternative techniques for target engagement that bypassed her visual processing limitations. Within weeks, Walsh was achieving accuracy levels that exceeded those of many personnel who had never experienced her challenges, demonstrating that Elena's methods could address problems that conventional training couldn't solve. The success with Walsh and similar cases convinced Elena that her most important contributions might come through individual instruction rather than large-scale program development. Working with people who needed alternative approaches to overcome specific challenges felt more meaningful than creating curricula for elite units, whose members already possessed exceptional capabilities. Elena's decision about the Special Operations Command offer was influenced by a conversation with Dr. Mitchell, whose research into Elena's neurological functions had produced fascinating results. "Your brain demonstrates structural adaptations that developed during your period of blindness," Dr. Mitchell explained. These changes created enhanced connectivity between sensory processing centers that allows for integration capabilities most people never achieve. The research findings suggested that Elena's abilities were the result of specific neurological adaptations rather than techniques that could be easily transferred to others. While her training methods could help people utilize their existing sensory capabilities more effectively, replicating her level of performance would require neurological changes that couldn't be produced through conventional training approaches. This information helped Elena understand why her achievement had been so extraordinary, and why attempts to replicate it might face fundamental limitations. Her capabilities were the product of unique circumstances that had forced adaptive changes most people would never experience, making her both valuable and irreplaceable as a specialist in sensory awareness applications. Elena's final decision about her military future was influenced by a letter she received from her sister Maria, who had witnessed her struggles during the years of blindness and recovery. "I'm proud of your achievement," Maria wrote, but I'm more proud of how you've maintained your character despite all the attention and pressure you're receiving. Remember that your real strength comes from overcoming personal challenges, not from the recognition others give you for it." The reminder helped Elena refocus on what truly mattered to her. Recognition and career advancement were less important than continuing to help people discover capabilities they didn't know they possessed. Her achievement at Camp Meridian had opened doors to opportunities she had never imagined, but it had also created responsibilities to use those opportunities constructively. Elena informed Colonel Park that she would decline the Special Operations Command position, choosing instead to remain at Camp Meridian as a specialized instructor focused on individual training and technique development. The decision surprised military officials who had expected her to pursue the career advancement that her achievement had made possible. Her choice reflected values that prioritized service over self-advancement and meaningful work over prestigious assignments. Elena understood that her unique capabilities carried responsibilities to help others rather than to advance her own career, and she was committed to fulfilling those responsibilities regardless of external pressures or incentives. The establishment of Elena's specialized training program at Camp Meridian attracted personnel from throughout the military who were interested in sensory awareness techniques. Her methods were incorporated into adaptive training protocols that helped soldiers with various challenges achieve success in marksmanship and other precision-dependent skills. Elena's approach emphasized individual assessment and customized instruction rather than standardized curricula that assumed uniform capabilities among trainees. She worked with each person to identify their specific strengths and limitations, developing training methods that maximized their potential while accommodating any constraints they faced. The program's success rate exceeded expectations, with personnel who had previously struggled in conventional training achieving proficiency levels that qualified them for advanced assignments. Elena's methods were particularly effective with individuals who possessed non-traditional skill sets or who faced challenges that conventional training couldn't address effectively. Master Sergeant Chen became one of Elena's strongest advocates within the military training community, frequently speaking about the transformation his own capabilities had undergone through exposure to her techniques. "Elena taught me that limitations often exist in our minds rather than in our actual capabilities," he would tell other instructors. Her methods help people discover potential they never knew they possessed. Elena's reputation extended beyond military circles, as civilian shooting sports organizations requested training consultations and technique demonstrations. Her blindfolded shooting capabilities fascinated competitive marksmen who were interested in pushing the boundaries of human performance in their own disciplines. But Elena remained focused on her military responsibilities and the opportunities to help individual soldiers overcome challenges that threatened their careers. She found deep satisfaction in working with people who needed alternative approaches to achieve success, understanding that her own experience with adaptation had prepared her to recognize potential in others that conventional evaluation methods might miss. The transformation at Camp Meridian continued to evolve as Elena's influence spread throughout the marksmanship training community. Her achievement had challenged assumptions about human capability that had limited military thinking for decades, creating opportunities for innovation that extended far beyond her specific area of expertise. Elena's story became part of military folklore, inspiring personnel who faced their own challenges and demonstrating that exceptional achievement often came from unexpected sources. Her blindfolded 15-target engagement was studied in military academies as an example of how human potential could exceed conventional limitations when properly developed and applied. But Elena herself remained focused on the individual interactions that had always been most meaningful to her, working with trainees who struggled with conventional methods, helping them discover capabilities they didn't know they possessed, and watching them achieve success through alternative approaches that honored their unique strengths and circumstances. Years later, when military historians analyzed the impact of Elena's achievement at Camp Meridian, they would identify it as a turning point in understanding human potential and the importance of recognizing exceptional capability regardless of its source or presentation. Her demonstration had proven that legends could emerge from the most unlikely circumstances when talent met opportunity under the right conditions. Elena's legacy would be measured not only in her own extraordinary performance, but in the countless individuals who achieved success through techniques she had developed and shared. Her blindfolded shooting demonstration had lasted only minutes, but its impact would influence military training methods for generations, proving that sometimes the most important victories were won by people nobody expected to fight them. The mountain winds that had whispered through Camp Meridian during Elena's first weeks continued to carry the scent of pine and the promise of challenges ahead. But Elena no longer felt intimidated by atmospheric conditions or institutional expectations that had once seemed insurmountable. She had learned that excellence emerged from the marriage of individual determination and environmental awareness, that capabilities could exceed limitations when properly understood and applied, and that the most meaningful achievements often came from helping others discover potential they never knew they possessed. Elena Vasquez had become a legend through her blindfolded marksmanship demonstration, but her true legacy would be found in the transformed lives of people who learned that their own limitations might be less absolute than they had believed. Sometimes the greatest victories were achieved not through individual glory, but through the quiet satisfaction of excellence shared with those ready to receive it. The future held uncertainties and challenges that Elena couldn't predict, but she faced them with confidence born from years of adaptation and growth. She had proven that human capability could exceed conventional understanding when properly developed, and she was committed to continuing that exploration through her work with individuals who needed alternative approaches to achieve their potential. In a world increasingly dependent on technology and standardized solutions, Elena represented the irreplaceable value of human expertise that emerged from unique circumstances and personal determination. Her story would inspire others who faced their own adaptations and challenges, demonstrating that exceptional achievement often came from sources that conventional wisdom overlooked or underestimated. Elena's blindfolded 15-target engagement had established her reputation as someone whose capabilities transcended normal limitations, but her character remained defined by the humility and service orientation that had guided her through years of invisible contribution. Recognition had come eventually, but it had never been her primary motivation. The mountains surrounding Camp Meridian stood as silent witnesses to transformations that extended far beyond individual achievement. Elena's story had become part of the landscape, inspiring future generations of soldiers who would discover that their own potential might exceed everything they had been taught to expect from themselves. And in the end, that was the most important legacy of all, the understanding that human capability remained largely unexplored, and that exceptional achievement was possible for anyone willing to challenge their own assumptions about what they could accomplish under the right circumstances, with proper guidance and determination. 5 years after her legendary demonstration at Camp Meridian, Elena Vasquez stood before an international assembly of military training specialists in Geneva, Switzerland. The conference room buzzed with conversations in multiple languages as representatives from 37 nations gathered to discuss revolutionary approaches to human performance enhancement in military contexts. Elena's presence at the International Defense Training Summit represented the culmination of a journey that had begun with inventory management duties and evolved into recognition as the world's foremost authority on sensory integration techniques for specialized operations. Her methods had been adopted by military organizations across 6 continents, fundamentally altering how elite units approach training for high-stakes missions. The keynote presentation Elena was scheduled to deliver would address developments that extended far beyond her original blindfolded shooting achievement. Her research team at the Advanced Human Performance Institute had made discoveries about neuroplasticity and sensory adaptation that were reshaping scientific understanding of human potential under extreme conditions. Dr. Lars Eriksson from the Swedish Defense Research Agency introduced Elena to the assembled delegates, with words that reflected her transformation from invisible support personnel to internationally recognized expert. Colonel Vasquez has revolutionized our understanding of how human sensory capabilities can be enhanced through targeted training protocols, he announced. Her work has produced measurable improvements in personnel effectiveness across multiple operational contexts. Elena approached the podium with the same calm confidence that had characterized her blindfolded shooting demonstration years earlier. The audience included military commanders, research scientists, and government officials whose decisions would influence how her techniques were implemented in their respective organizations. Delegates, she began, addressing the assembly in clear, measured tones. The research we'll discuss today demonstrates that human sensory awareness represents our most underutilized resource for operational effectiveness. Traditional training methods develop only a fraction of the capabilities that exist within every individual, regardless of their apparent limitations or conventional qualifications. Elena's presentation incorporated video demonstrations of techniques she had developed for various specialized applications. Soldiers navigating complex urban environments while vision was compromised by smoke or darkness. intelligence operatives identifying threats through auditory signatures that others couldn't detect, medical personnel performing precision procedures under conditions where traditional visual guidance was inadequate. Each example illustrated principles that Elena had discovered through her own adaptation to blindness, and subsequently refined through years of working with personnel who faced diverse challenges. The core insight remained consistent across all applications. Human beings possessed sensory capabilities that far exceeded what conventional training methods could access or develop. The breakthrough that had elevated Elena's work from military training curiosity to scientific revolution came through collaboration with Dr. Yuki Tanaka from the Japanese Institute for Neurological Research. Dr. Tanaka's brain imaging studies of Elena's neurological functions had revealed structural adaptations that could be replicated through specific training protocols, rather than requiring the traumatic sensory loss that had originally triggered Elena's development. Our joint research demonstrates that targeted neuroplasticity training can produce enhanced sensory integration in individuals who have never experienced sensory impairment, Dr. Tanaka explained during the technical portion of Elena's presentation. The brain's capacity for adaptation extends far beyond what we previously understood, and Colonel Vasquez's techniques provide practical methods for accessing that capacity. The implications were staggering. Elena's methods could potentially enhance the sensory awareness of any individual willing to undergo intensive training, creating capabilities that had previously been considered impossible or available only to those who had adapted to extraordinary circumstances. General Antoine Dubois from the French Military Academy raised questions about the practical applications of Elena's research for large-scale military training programs. Colonel Vasquez, he inquired, how do we balance the intensive individual attention your methods require with the need to train thousands of personnel efficiently and cost-effectively? Elena had anticipated this challenge and had spent considerable effort developing scalable training approaches that preserved the essential elements of her techniques while accommodating institutional requirements for standardized instruction. We've created modular training systems that can be adapted to different learning styles and capability levels, she replied. The key is maintaining focus on individual assessment while utilizing group training methods that maximize resource efficiency. The presentation continued with demonstrations of technologies Elena's team had developed to support sensory awareness training. Virtual reality systems that created controlled environments for practicing enhanced perception techniques. Acoustic training devices that helped personnel develop discrimination capabilities for identifying threats through sound analysis. Haptic feedback systems that enhanced spatial awareness training for navigation under compromised visibility conditions. Captain Maria Santos from the Brazilian Special Forces described her unit's experience implementing Elena's training methods over the previous 18 months. Our personnel demonstrate measurably improved performance in night operations, urban warfare scenarios, and hostage rescue situations where environmental conditions limit conventional sensory input, she reported. The techniques have become integral to our operational effectiveness. Similar testimonials came from representatives of military organizations throughout Europe, Asia, and North America. Elena's methods have been tested in real-world conditions, ranging from Arctic survival training to desert counter-terrorism operations, consistently producing results that exceeded traditional training outcomes. But Elena's most significant contribution to the field extended beyond technical innovations to include philosophical changes in how military organizations approached human potential development. Her emphasis on recognizing capability in unexpected forms had influenced recruitment practices, training methodologies, and personnel evaluation systems throughout the international military community. Commander Sarah Abdullah from the Royal Navy described how Elena's principles had transformed their approach to identifying candidates for specialized programs. We discovered that some of our most effective personnel were individuals who had been overlooked by conventional selection criteria, she explained. Colonel Vasquez's work taught us that exceptional capability often exists in forms that traditional evaluation methods cannot recognize. Elena's influence had also extended into civilian applications, where her sensory awareness techniques were being used to help individuals with various disabilities achieve independence and effectiveness that surpassed societal expectations. Rehabilitation programs, educational institutions, and healthcare organizations were implementing modified versions of her methods to address challenges that conventional approaches couldn't solve. Dr. Michael Chen from the University of California Medical Center presented research showing how Elena's techniques had revolutionized treatment for patients recovering from traumatic brain injuries. By teaching enhanced sensory integration, we're helping individuals develop alternative neural pathways that compensate for damaged brain regions, he explained. The results exceed anything we thought possible through traditional rehabilitation methods. Elena listened to these presentations with mixed emotions, proud of the positive impact her work was generating, but concerned about maintaining the human-centered focus that had always guided her approach. The proliferation of her techniques across multiple contexts created risks that institutional pressures might distort the essential principles that made them effective. During the conference's afternoon session, Elena participated in a panel discussion about ethical considerations surrounding human enhancement research. The capabilities her methods could produce raised questions about fairness in competitive contexts, security implications of enhanced sensory awareness, and societal responsibilities for ensuring equitable access to performance enhancement opportunities. Professor Elizabeth Weber from the Vienna Institute for Ethics and Technology posed challenging questions about the broader implications of Elena's research. If these capabilities become widely available, how do we address disparities between enhanced and non-enhanced individuals? What are our obligations to ensure that these advantages don't create new forms of inequality or discrimination? Elena acknowledged the complexity of these issues while maintaining her commitment to the therapeutic and humanitarian applications that had always motivated her work. Our primary responsibility is to help individuals overcome challenges and achieve their potential, she replied. Enhancement for its own sake was never the goal. The focus should remain on addressing genuine needs and creating opportunities for people who face barriers that conventional methods cannot address. The conference concluded with the establishment of an international consortium for sensory awareness research that would coordinate development and implementation of Elena's techniques across participating nations. Elena was appointed as the consortium's scientific director, a position that would allow her to influence how her methods were adapted and applied worldwide. But even as her international recognition reached new heights, Elena remained connected to the individual training work that had always been most meaningful to her. She continued to spend significant portions of her time working directly with personnel who needed specialized assistance, maintaining the personal connection that had inspired her original development of these techniques. One such case involved Sergeant First Class David Kim, a combat veteran who had lost partial vision in an improvised explosive device attack during his deployment in Afghanistan. Kim had been struggling with depression and feelings of inadequacy since his injury, convinced that his military career was effectively over despite his extensive experience and leadership capabilities. Elena worked with Kim over several months, teaching him adapted techniques that allowed him to utilize his remaining vision more effectively, while developing enhanced awareness capabilities that compensated for his visual limitations. The transformation was dramatic, restoring Kim's confidence and enabling him to return to active duty in a specialized training role. These individual success stories continued to provide Elena with the motivation and perspective that kept her grounded despite the international attention her work received. Each person who overcame challenges through her techniques validated the principles that had guided her development from administrative clerk to recognized expert. Elena's personal life had also undergone significant changes during her years of professional growth. She had married Dr. James Rodriguez, a neuropsychologist who shared her interest in human potential research and provided both personal support and professional collaboration that enhanced her work's effectiveness. Their research partnership had produced innovations that neither could have achieved independently, combining Elena's practical experience with sensory adaptation and James's theoretical knowledge of brain function and learning processes. Together, they had established the Vasquez-Rodriguez Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to providing sensory awareness training for individuals with disabilities and veterans facing rehabilitation challenges. The foundation's work extended Elena's impact beyond military applications to include educational programs for children with learning differences, employment training for adults with visual or hearing impairments, and adaptive technology development that made her techniques accessible to broader populations. Elena's story had also become the subject of academic study and popular media attention that sometimes distorted the realities of her experience and achievements. Books, documentaries, and research papers analyzing her blindfolded shooting demonstration often focused on the dramatic aspects of her performance while missing the years of patient adaptation and skill development that had made it possible. She had learned to accept this attention as an inevitable consequence of public recognition, while maintaining focus on the substantive work that continued to drive her efforts. Fame was less important than effectiveness, and effectiveness required ongoing commitment to the individual interactions and continuous learning that had always characterized her approach. Elena's influence on military training philosophy had produced changes that extended far beyond sensory awareness techniques. Her emphasis on recognizing potential in unexpected forms had encouraged more inclusive recruitment practices, more flexible training methodologies, and greater appreciation for diverse approaches to problem-solving within military organizations. General Patricia Hawkins, who had overseen Elena's initial Pentagon briefings years earlier, reflected on the broader implications of Elena's contributions during her retirement ceremony. Colonel Vasquez taught us that excellence can emerge from any source when properly recognized and supported, she observed. Her work has fundamentally changed how we think about human capability and institutional responsibility for developing individual potential. Elena's international consortium had grown to include research partnerships with universities, medical institutions, and technology companies that were exploring applications of sensory enhancement techniques across multiple fields. The collaboration was producing innovations that extended her original methods into areas she had never anticipated, from surgical training to space exploration preparation. The consortium's annual conference had become a premier forum for presenting research on human performance enhancement, drawing participants from disciplines ranging from neuroscience to competitive athletics. Elena's role as scientific director allowed her to influence the research agenda while ensuring that humanitarian applications remained prioritized alongside commercial and military interests. But perhaps Elena's most lasting legacy was found in the individuals whose lives had been transformed through exposure to her techniques and philosophy. Thousands of military personnel, rehabilitation patients, students with learning challenges, and others facing various obstacles had discovered capabilities they never knew they possessed through training methods Elena had developed and shared. Each success story represented validation of principles that Elena had learned through her own adaptation to blindness, and subsequently refined through years of working with others who faced their own challenges. The understanding that human potential extended far beyond conventional limitations, that capabilities could be developed regardless of apparent obstacles, and that meaningful achievement often came from sources that traditional evaluation methods overlooked or underestimated. Elena's blindfolded 15-target shooting demonstration at Camp Meridian had been a single moment of extraordinary performance, but its significance lay in what it represented about human potential rather than in the achievement itself. That demonstration had opened doors to opportunities for helping countless individuals discover their own exceptional capabilities under the right circumstances, with appropriate guidance and support. As Elena prepared to address future challenges and opportunities in her field, she remained guided by the same principles that had sustained her through years of adaptation and growth. Recognition and professional advancement were less important than meaningful contribution to others' development. Technical innovation mattered only insofar as it enabled human flourishing. And individual success was most valuable when it created opportunities for others to achieve their own potential. The international stage that Elena now occupied provided platforms for influence and impact that she could never have imagined during her early years of inventory management at Camp Meridian. But the essential motivations that drove her work remained unchanged from those early days when she had quietly solved equipment problems and wondered whether her hidden capabilities might someday find appropriate recognition and application. Elena's story had become one of the military's most inspiring examples of how extraordinary achievement could emerge from unexpected circumstances when talent met opportunity under the right conditions. Her transformation from overlooked support personnel to internationally recognized expert demonstrated that conventional evaluation methods often failed to identify the most valuable capabilities within their own organizations. The future held challenges and opportunities that Elena couldn't predict, but she faced them with confidence born from years of proving that human potential exceeded conventional understanding when properly developed and applied. Her work would continue to evolve as new technologies and methodologies emerged, but the core principles would remain constant, focusing on individual needs, recognizing diverse forms of capability, and maintaining commitment to helping others discover potential they never knew they possessed. Elena Vasquez had become a legend through her blindfolded marksmanship demonstration, but her true legacy was found in the transformed understanding of human potential that her work had created throughout the international community. Her story would continue to inspire individuals who faced their own adaptations and challenges, proving that exceptional achievement was possible for anyone willing to challenge conventional assumptions about limitations and capabilities. The mountain winds that had once carried uncertainty and challenge through Camp Meridian now whispered of transformations that extended across continents and cultures. Elena's influence had spread far beyond the ranges where she had first demonstrated her extraordinary abilities, touching lives and changing perspectives in ways that would resonate for generations. Her blindfolded shooting had lasted only minutes, but its impact continued to expand through every individual who learned that their own potential might exceed everything they had been taught to expect from themselves. In the end, that was the most important achievement of all, the understanding that human capability remained largely unexplored, and that exceptional performance was possible under the right circumstances, with proper guidance, determination, and the courage to challenge conventional wisdom about what was achievable. Elena's legacy would be measured not only in her own extraordinary demonstrations, but in the countless moments when others discovered capabilities they didn't know they possessed, achieved success they had thought impossible, and learned that their apparent limitations might be less absolute than they had believed. Those discoveries would continue long after her individual achievements were forgotten, proving that the greatest victories were often won through the quiet satisfaction of excellence shared with those ready to receive it. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.